Chapter 6 of The Duke of Chimney Butte. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Duke of Chimney Butte by G.W. Ogden. Chapter 6. Allurements of Glendora. In a bend of the Little Missouri, where it broadened out and took on the appearance of a consequential stream, Glendora lay, a lonely little village with a gray hill behind it. There was but half a street in Glendora, like a setting for a stage, the railroad in the foreground, the little sun-baked station crouching by it, lonely as the winds which sung by night, and the telegraph wires crossing its roof. Here the trains went by with a roar, leaving behind them a cloud of gray dust, like a curtain to hide from the eyes of those who strained from their windows to see the little that remained of Glendora, once a place of more consequence than today. Only enough remained of the town to live by its trade. There was enough flour in the store, enough whiskey in the saloon, enough stamps in the post office, enough beds in the hotel to satisfy with comfort the demands of the far-stretching population of the country contiguous thereto. But if there had risen an extraordinary occasion, bringing a demand without notice for 1,000 pounds more flour, a barrel more of whiskey, 100 more stamps, or 5 extra beds, Glendora would have fallen under the burden and collapsed in disgrace. Close by the station there were cattle pens for loading stock, with 2 long tracks for holding the cars. In autumn fat cattle were driven down out of the hidden valleys to entrain there for market. In those days there was merriment after nightfall in Glendora. At other times it was mainly a quiet place, the shooting that was done on its one-sided street being of a peaceful nature, in the way of expressing a feeling for which some plain-witted drunken cowarder had no words. A good many years before the day that the Duke and Taterleg came riding into Glendora, the town had supported more than one store and saloon. The shells of these dead enterprises stood there still, windows and doors boarded up, as if their owners had stopped their mouths when they went away to prevent a whisper of the secrets that might tell of the old riotous nights, or of fallen hopes or dishonest transactions. So they stood now, in their melancholy backs against the gray hill, giving to Glendora the appearance of a town that was more than half dead and soon must fail and pass utterly away in the gray blowing clouds of dust. The hotel seemed the brightest and soundest living spot in the place, for it was painted in green like a watermelon, with a cottonwood tree growing beside the pump at the porch corner. In yellow letters upon the windowpane of the office there appeared the proprietor's name, doubtless the work of some wandering artist who had paid the price of his lodging or his dinner so. Orson Wood, proprietor, said the sign, bedded in curlicues and twisted ornaments, as if a carpenter had planed the letters out of a board, leaving the shavings where they fell. A green rustic bench stood across one end of the long porch, such as is seen in boarding houses frequented by railroad men, and chairs with whittled and notched arms before the office door near the pump. Into this atmosphere there had come many years before one of those innocents among men whose misfortune it is to fall before the beguiledness of the dishonest, that sort of man whom the promoters of schemes go out to catch in the manner of an old maid trapping flies in a cup of suds. Milton Philbrook was this man. Somebody had sold him 40,000 acres of land in a body for $3 an acre. It began at the river and ran back to the hills for a matter of 20 miles. Philbrook bought the land on the showing which it was rich in coal deposits, which was true enough, but he was not geologist enough to know that it was only lignite and not a coal of commercial value in those times. The truth he came to later, together with the knowledge that his land was worth at the most extravagant valuation not more than 50 cents an acre. Finding no market for his brown coal, Philbrook decided to adopt the custom of the country and turn cattleman. A little inquiry into the business convinced him that the expenses of growing the cattle and the long distance from market absorbed a great bulk of the profits needlessly. He set about with the original plan, therefore, of fencing his 40,000 acres with wires, thus erasing at one bold stroke the cost of hiring men to guard his herds. A fence in the Bad Lands was unknown outside a corral in those days. When carloads of barbed wire and posts began to arrive at Glendora, men came riding in for miles to satisfy themselves that the rumors were founded. When Philbrook hired men to build the fence and operations were begun, murmurs and threats against the unwelcome innovation were heard. Philbrook pushed the work to conclusion, unmindful of the threats, moved now by the intention of founding a great baronial estate in that bleak land. His further plan of profit and consequence was to establish a packing house at Glendora, where his herds could be slaughtered and dressed and shipped neat to market, at once assuring him a double profit and reduced expense. But that was one phase of his dream that never hardened into the reality of machinery and bricks. While the long lines of fence were going up, carpenters were at work building a fit seat for Philbrook's baronial aims. The point he chose for his home site was the top of a bare plateau overlooking the river, the face of it gray, crumbling shale, rising 300 feet in abrupt slope from the water's edge. At great labor and expense, Philbrook built a road between Glendora and this place, and carried water in pipes from the river to irrigate the grass, trees, shrubs, and blooming plants alien to that country, which he planted to break the bleakness of it and make a setting for his costly home. Here on this jutting shoulder of cold, unfriendly upland, a house rose which was the wonder of all who beheld it, as they rode the wild distances and viewed it from afar. It seemed a mansion to them, its walls gleaming white, its roof green as the hope of its builder's breast. It was a large house, and seemed larger for its prominence against the sky, built in the shape of an T, with wide porches in the angles. And to this place, upon which he had lavished what remained of his fortune, Philbrook brought his wife and little daughter, as strange as their surroundings as the delicate flowers which pined and drooped in the unfriendly soil. Immediately upon completion of his fences, he had imported well-bred cattle and set them grazing within his confines. He set men to riding by night and day a patrol of his long lines of wire, rifles under their thighs, with orders to shoot anybody found cutting the fence in accordance with the many threats to serve them so. Contentions and feuds began, and battles and bloody encounters, which did not cease through many a turbulent year. Philbrook lived in the saddle, for he was a man of high courage and unbending determination, leaving his wife and child in the suspense and solitude of their grand home, in which they found no pleasure. The trees and shrubs which Philbrook had planted with such care and attended with such hope withered on the bleak plateau and died in spite of the water from the river. The delicate grass with which he sought to beautify and clothe the harsh gray soil sickened and pined away. The shrubs made a short battle against the bleakness of winter, putting out pale, strange flowers like the wan smile of a woman who stands on the threshold of death, then failed anyway and died. Mrs. Philbrook broke under the strain of never-ending battles and died the spring that her daughter came 18 years of age. The girl had grown up in the saddle, a true daughter of her fighting sire. Time and again she had led a patrol of 2 fence riders along one side of the 60 square miles of ranch while her father guarded the other. She could handle firearms with speed and accuracy equal to any man on the range, where she had been bearing a man's burden since her early girlhood. All this information pertaining to the history of Milton Philbrook and his adventures in the Bad Lands, Orson Wood, the one-armed landlord at the hotel in Glendora, told Lambert on the evening of the traveler's arrival there. The story had come as the result of questions concerning the great white house on the mesa, the 2 men sitting on the porch in plain view of it, Taterleg entertaining the daughter of the hotel across the showcase in the office. Lambert found the story more interesting than anything he had imagined of the Bad Lands. Here was romance looking down on him from the lonely walls of the White House, and heroism of finer kind than these people appreciated, he was sure. "Is the girl still here?" he inquired. "Yes, she's back now. She's been away to school in Boston for 3 or 4 years, coming back in summer for a little while." "When did she come back?" Lambert felt that his voice was thick as he inquired,